All right, let's get into it. We're going to talk about one of the biggest, most famous rivalries in all of music history, a real clash of titans back in the 19th century. But here's the kicker. The real story is the surprising verdict that came decades later and completely flipped the script. So just imagine for a second, you're a young composer in Europe. And this question, Brahms or Wagner, it wasn't just about what music you liked. Oh no. It was a choice that could define your entire career, your friends, your artistic soul. The whole music world was split right down the middle, and you had to pick a side. So, what was all the fuss about? Well, people literally called it the War of the Romantics. And on the surface, it looked like a classic battle between two totally different guys with two completely opposite ideas about where music should go next. And you can see just how clear the battle lines were drawn. On one side, you've got Johannes Brahms. He was seen as the guardian of tradition, the guy perfecting the old classical forms like the Symphony. And on the other side, Richard Wagner, the self-proclaimed revolutionary who basically promised to burn it all down and build a totally new kind of art. But this went so much deeper than just two personalities clashing. This was a fight for the very soul of music. Let's dig into the big ideas that were fueling this whole fire. The progressive side, Wagner's side, even had an official name, the New German School. This wasn't just a casual thing, it was a real intellectual movement. They saw themselves as the future, the next logical step after Beethoven, with Wagner as their undisputed leader. And this right here gets to the heart of the whole debate. The big question was, what is music for? Should music be absolute, music for music's sake, where the notes and the structure are the story? Or should it be program music, where it's actually about something else, a poem, a story, a myth, and only really shines when it's combined with other arts? Team Brahms was all about absolute music, while Team Wagner thought music's true destiny was in opera. And make no mistake, this was not some polite, behind-the-scenes disagreement. Brahms and his crew went public. They actually published a manifesto in the papers, basically calling out Wagner and his whole movement. This was a declaration of war, plain and simple. So, for years and years, that was the accepted story. Brahms, the old-fashioned traditionalist, versus Wagner, the forward-thinking revolutionary. But then, fast forward to the middle of the 20th century, and a totally new argument popped up that changed how we see everything. And there it is. This is a quote from Arnold Schoenberg, who was himself one of the most radical, boundary-pushing composers of the 20th century. And he looked back at this whole feud and basically said, "You've all got it wrong." The real innovator, the true progressive, he argued, was actually Brahms. I mean, what a bombshell, right? How could the quiet, bearded classicist be more of a trailblazer than the guy who literally built his own theater for his futuristic operas? Well, Schoenberg laid out his case like a master lawyer. Okay, so Schoenberg's first point was simple. Just look at the notes. He argued that if you actually sit down and analyze Brahms's music, you'll find harmonies that were incredibly complex, incredibly advanced, and totally ahead of their time. Now, you don't even need to be able to read music to get a sense of this. Schoenberg would point to passages just like this one as his Exhibit A. Just look at how dense that is, how packed with information. He was showing that hiding under that smooth, classical surface, Brahms is doing some really wild stuff. And he didn't pull any punches. Schoenberg came right out and said that this music from Brahms could go toe-to-toe with anything Wagner wrote. He put Brahms on the same level or even a higher one when it came to harmonic innovation. Schoenberg's second big argument was all about how Brahms built his music. See, Wagner was famous for his leitmotifs, these recurring themes for characters or ideas. But Schoenberg said Brahms did something far more sophisticated. He called it developing variation. Brahms would take one tiny little musical idea, just a little seed, and let it grow and transform throughout an entire piece. It was always changing, always becoming something new, but it was all logically connected. And here's a perfect example of what he was talking about. Schoenberg showed how a big theme in the final movement of Brahms's Fourth Symphony was secretly, cleverly built from a little idea way back in the first movement. It's like a hidden thread tying the whole 40-minute symphony together into one single logical thought. To help people understand this, Schoenberg used this fantastic analogy from literature. He said that listening to a Brahms piece wasn't just hearing a collection of nice tunes. It was like reading a perfectly crafted novel, where every single sentence, every paragraph, every chapter builds on what came before it.
So, if Schoenberg had such a good point, why was this feud so bitter in the first place? And how did it ever end? Well, the truth is kind of simple. The next generation of composers just stopped caring about the labels. This timeline really shows you how quickly that so-called impassable gulf just vanished. Once the two masters were gone, composers like Mahler and Strauss came along and thought, hey, why do we have to choose? They took Wagner's epic drama and Brahms's brilliant structure and mashed them together. Pretty soon, the war was just over. And today, it's totally normal to see them both on the same concert program.
You know, maybe the best final word on this entire debate comes from a completely different world. The great Duke Ellington said it best. If it sounds good, it is good. At the end of the day, all the theories and manifestos don't matter as much as the music itself. And that really leaves us with one last question to think about. For decades, the label traditionalist made people completely miss the innovation in Brahms's music. It just makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are the labels we use today, and how might they be shaping or even limiting what we see, what we read, and what we're actually willing to hear?